It's fine. It ain't about me. It ain't about me.
We are live.
Good evening. My name is Damita Chatman. I'm the host of Citizens for Excellence in Elected Leaders. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. We're going to have a little rule that I make sure everybody know. No talking because we're taping also for the television. The candidates were asked the questions from the moderator. Oh, if you want to ask questions, we're going to have cards that you come around and give you your cards. And so before we go on, I want to thank Pastor Chris for allowing me to be in his house. And so I'm going to always obey and respect the man of this house, and that's Pastor Chris. So thank you, Pastor Chris, for allowing us to put these forms on. The form is not about Damita Chatman. It's about the people that's running for these elected office seats and make sure that we get the right candidate in office. So, in further ado, I'm going to give Pastor Chris to do a word of prayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Chatman. Again, we want to express a welcome to you. We're glad to offer our location for this series of election forums. There is life at Decision Point Ministries. We are a house of prayer. We are in the community to represent God of the Holy Bible, run his kingdom through making disciples. Beyond regular worship, we're involved with the local schools, engaging them in ministry activity. Recently, 100 new neckties for the Sandtown Middle School boys. And then also upcoming, we're providing gift cards to each of 100 teachers and staff coming up for Teacher Appreciation Time. I say that to say that the church and community must begin to see what it looks like to collaborate together. That is not a separation that a government can make or a person can pronounce, but it's what's needed for our community. So we're blessed with buildings and grounds, Deuteronomy 6 style. There are 8 commercial AC units, for instance, for this one building alone. But I want to share a brief word with us before I pray about commitment, because all of this has been set aside and committed to God. That's how these last few years have happened. That's how this space is available and open for free. And when we talk about how we live out our commitment to Jesus as Christ followers, that looks different from people who are just fans. And so we have to ask ourselves, what does our it look like? It meaning our intentional trajectory. Our life's journey as we go forward is very important. So make no mistake about it. The righteous even fall short and come short of doing the right thing all the time. But we walk in the power of the Holy Spirit, seeking to do what God would have us to do, committed to doing that. Very important for us to understand this necessity of collaboration. We strongly value that orthopraxy matches our orthodoxy. So we don't have to vehemently justify our existence. How do we do so much with so little? We call ourselves a mega church, but a mega church not of numbers of people, but of actions that are impactful. And so we would need to pray for God's kingdom work here at Decision Point and all across Fulton and even the state of Georgia and our country. We need to pray that pastoral leaders would have biblical worldviews from God's word. We need people led of the Lord to become a part of local churches. And then, of course, we need to make sure that we put our money where our mouth is. We support what happens. The lights don't come on for free. The water doesn't run for free. The chairs don't get replaced. The batteries don't replace for free. So I encourage you today to plug in to this forum and to the other forums, get a good understanding, get good clarity about what you would do in terms of the elections. I want to pray for us now and pray for this gathering. I want to encourage you again to respect the fact that this is God's house, follow the rules that have been set forth by the sponsoring organization, but also to respect the fact that really God is in charge. Let me pray. Father, we thank you. Thank you so much for this gathering, and we lift up to you every man, woman, boy, and girl that is part of the in-person venue, but also a part of any other venue that they're connecting to process information from. Father, I pray that you would give good clarity of speech to those who speak. I pray that you would give good understanding where understanding may even be lacking at the start of this gathering. And then, Father, we thank you because our times are in your hand. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
To Chris. Now I will be introducing our moderators. Again, I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. We have Miss Kathy Adams, moderator, and Pastor J.D. Flint. Another moderator. I want to thank you guys for coming, take your time out of your schedule. And just to let the folks know, these moderators are qualified. And they got the questions and nobody else has the questions. So whatever question they ask the candidates, I might be surprised too, because I don't have the questions. So I'm going to turn this over to Kathy Adams and Pastor J.D. Flint. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Adams, as mentioned, and thank you, Ms. Damita Chatman, for the extension of the invitation to have us to present to our listening audience this evening. And to all the candidates, thank you for accepting our invitation to participate in this evening's event. So first, I'd like to allow Pastor Joe to say a few words, if you'd like.
Just let's get ready to rumble. How about that?
Sounds good. Sounds good. So welcome to the State Representative District 65 Candidates Forum. Each of the candidates have been invited to participate in this evening's forum. And with that, following, I'm going to give you the house rules for the forum this evening. Each candidate will be given a minute and a half for an opening statement. And then following, each candidate will have 2 minutes for their closing statement. Each candidate will be given a minute and a half to respond to the questions. The moderator will call on each candidate in the order that he or she chooses. In other words, we won't do 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 1. We might do 1, 3, 4, 2, random order. So you have to pay attention. All of the candidates will receive the same number of questions. However, you may not receive the same questions. So the timekeeper will sound the bell that indicates time is up. And when there's remaining time, there will be a 30-second indicator. If a candidate continues to speak after their time limit, he or she will be interrupted and asked to stop. Questions will come from both the in-person audience and our virtual audiences. And with the virtual audiences, we will have them to submit their questions. We'll receive them via chat, Joe and I, and we will ask the questions of the candidates. We will do our best to vet the questions so that we're not asking the same question 4 different ways. So also the questions coming from the audience, they'll be submitted on index cards and they will be brought to both Pastor Joe and I. And again, we will make sure that we ask those questions of the candidates. Remember, the candidates will receive the same number of questions, but you may not receive the same question. And then the random order is at our discretion. And now I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Joe, and he's going to take us to the next, our next level.
Well, again, good evening, and we thank you so very much for joining us this evening as we learn more about the candidates for this wonderful district. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the privilege of being able to introduce these young fellows that are before us, and I would like to do so by starting with Mr. Mel Keaton, excuse me. Mel Keaton, Mr. Robert Dawson, and Dr. DeAndre S. Pickett, as well as Samuel Wakefield. Gentlemen, we thank you so very much for joining us this evening. In this year's election, we have 4 candidates that have qualified to run for the vacated seat. All of the candidates will be participating in this evening's forum. Each candidate will share information about yourselves as to why they are better candidates for the position to represent District 65. Each candidate is seeking to govern, create policy, manage budgets, and be a visionary, creating long-term plans for sustainable growth, more so led with tact and diplomacy. Our timekeeper will sound the bell when the time has ended for each statement. If the candidate goes beyond that time, they will be interrupted. Kathy, you want to take us more?
Well, I'd like to go ahead and get started, if we will. Going to ask the first question, and this question is for, and I'll tell you what, if you can turn your tent cards just a little bit so that we can see them. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask this question of Mr. Samuel Wakefield. This is, should the state of Georgia protect the reproductive freedom by repealing the current 6-week abortion ban, restoring the protections of Roe v. Wade, and ensuring access to contraceptives?
All right. Hello. All right. First of all, thank you for having us here this evening. My name is Sam Wakefield, hoping to be your candidate for District 65. Sorry. Okay, you all can hear me great. My short answer is yes. I believe very firmly that our state should be protecting women's reproductive rights. And I'll tell you, I was raised by strong Black women. My grandmother, who just turned 85 a few months ago, who has been a voting rights advocate for years and years throughout my life. My wife, and then I'm raising 4 daughters with my wife. We have 4 daughters. We believe very strongly in our household that women should have the right to make the decisions about what happens with their body. I think it's unconscionable that our government has gotten involved to the level that it has. And I believe that every woman in our state should have the ability to make and exercise free decisions over what happens with their own bodies. I will also just add, I feel like a lot of the conversation that exists in this area around, protecting life only stops at birth, as opposed to really thinking about how we protect life beyond the birth of a child. This is the state that has some of the worst maternal health outcomes for women in general across the country. And we have the worst maternal health outcomes for Black women. So before we even start the conversation about protecting life at birth, we should also start the conversation around how do we ensure that Black women in the state can actually birth the child safely and have that child taken care of through adequate health care. So I want to have that conversation, but my first answer is I absolutely believe that women's reproductive rights should be protected in this state.
Thank you so very kindly, Mr. Wakefield. Our next question will go to Mr. Mel Keaton. Should the state of Georgia raise the minimum wage to a living wage?
In some instances, yes. A lot of small businesses cannot afford to. It just depends on what that wage is. It depends on what you're doing. Sometimes these jobs only have part-time positions, so they may not be able to afford to pay all the time a living wage which is an average of about maybe $32,000 at a small business, unless we actually give more funding to small businesses. But however, I am an advocate for unions, and I have fought for unions for people to have living wages in the industry that I came from before what I'm in now. And I do think that everybody deserves to have a well living wage to support their family, to purchase a home, be a homeowner later on in life, no matter what age you are, where you come from, your ethnicity, background. So I do feel that in some cases, depending on your job and your status, that you should be able to, minimum wage should be raised higher.
Thank you for those answers, gentlemen. And let me apologize to our candidates as I did not give them the opportunity to actually introduce themselves. So we're going to go back, if you will, for just a moment. We'll start with Mr. Dawson, and we'll go to Mr. Wakefield. We'll come back to Dr. Pickett, and then back to Mr. Keaton. So please introduce yourselves. You have 2 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Robert Dawson, your candidate for this most important position. I'm asking for your support and your vote right now because I believe this position is too important to leave in the hands of anyone else. I'm a proud resident of the city of South Fulton. I'm a Democratic post-seat holder with the Fulton County Dems, and I serve on the executive committee for the South Fulton Democrats, where I've been working tirelessly to elect Democratic candidates throughout the region, specifically in the city and in this district, and then also working on national campaigns. Again, I'd like to thank the moderators here, the audience, the listeners who are listening in live right now. Also like to thank Ms. Chatman, and of course, the pastor and members of this great church. Great to be here again. Also want to acknowledge my campaign manager who's in the office. Well, she's more my campaign manager, my office manager, my barista, assistant, all those things. Shakari Chavez, I couldn't do this without my team. So glad to see her in attendance here tonight as well. I was born and raised right next door in Birmingham, Alabama, and the cradle of the civil rights movement. So I believe in service. You know, I didn't fall from heaven. As a young man, I had to find my way, right? Like all of our young men do. And there were men and women, pastors, leaders, I could call their names if I had more time, who supported me and made me the man that I am today. So I feel I owe a debt to my community. And that's why I'm working hard right now to pay that debt back. Win, lose, or draw, it's a privilege and honor for me to be here and to address you all, share my viewpoints. And I promise you, again, win, lose, or draw, I won't take my ball and go home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. We appreciate your introduction. Please, now to Mr. Wakefield.
All right. Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you again for hosting us, both the church and also our moderators. My name is Sam Wakefield. I started my public career as an educator almost 2 decades ago in a classroom in Atlanta Public Schools. And it was during those years in the classroom where I got to see a number of students, mostly young Black boys who looked like me, who had similar experiences as me, who were being raised by single moms. And it reminded me of my own upbringing. I mentioned a moment ago that I was raised by very strong Black women, my mother and my grandmother who just turned 85 a few months ago, and my mother. You know, they taught me to believe in a number of things. First of all, education, which was really important in our household growing up. And also my grandmother, who was a voting rights advocate. You know, the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. She was 26 years old as an adult when she was able to vote in her state legally for the first time. And so for our lifetime, we were taught education, voting rights, and in particular, healthcare were really, really important. And so those are the 3 things that I'm focusing on in our campaign. As I mentioned, also my wife and I, we have 4 daughters. So there's a lot of Black girl magic in my household. I'm really excited to stand with women in a lot of the work that we have to get done in our district. And I'm also civically engaged in our district. So I sit on a number of school boards. I've been volunteering in a number of other organizations. And, you know, similar to all of the other candidates up here, we all have lots of opportunities to engage. My assumption is each of us will continue to be engaged, win, lose, or draw. So I thank you again for your attention this evening. I look forward to talking more.
Thank you, Mr. Wakefield. Now we will hear from Dr. Pickett.
Again, good evening, and thank you again for this opportunity. Again, I'm Dr. DeAndre Pickett. I call myself a son of the South Side, even though I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up on the other side of Campbellton Road, and I graduated from Mays High School. Unfortunately, I am not a part of the class who's getting in to Morris Brown, but I'm a proud alumnus of the institution, so I'm grateful for that. As Mr. Wakefield, I spent my years in education early on, and I saw the disheartening disparities that we had in our educational system. And I knew that we had to do something. So again, I wanted to make sure that no young person experienced the type of inequalities that I've seen across the nation. And so I made a commitment that I would never serve and work in an area where kids did not look like me. Because we a lot of times get in our education and we move out our districts, we move out our communities, and we don't come back to our communities and actually do the work. And I made a commitment to do that. And so I fight hard for education every day. Being someone who's been a three-time, not once, not twice, but three-time cancer survivor, I knew the hardships of healthcare. Being someone who had a job, had healthcare, but realized I had to make a determination if I was going to either pay my bill or get medicine. And I believe nobody should have to make that kind of decision, especially if your life depended on it. So I said I was going to continue to fight for education. I decided to do that by becoming one of the leaders in the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, which is the largest legislative Black caucus in the nation. I actually worked for them for quite some time. So I worked with a lot of the state legislators down in the Capitol, helping build a policy that would fight for us who looked like us. Then, of course, I now, after leaving the educational system, went into the mental health field because I knew that there was such a strong disconnect. After COVID, so many of our individuals, so many of our people suffered at the hands of mental illness, and we did not have the resources here in our state to do so. So now I'm fighting nationally, but I want to make sure that I'm doing my part in the state to do our part. And so, as it said, I believe all of us have some wonderful things that we can bring to a table, and I think that we'll still continue to work whichever is elected to this seat.
Thank you, Dr. Pickett. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will have Mr. Keaton.
Hi, I'm Mel Keaton, running for District 65 State Representative. I work in engineering, construction, and watershed, and for DeKalb County, I service about 33 cities on a daily basis. So one can say, I guess I've lived to serve. I serve as the president of my homeowners association as the president, and I'm a native of the community. Once I went to Continental Colony Elementary School, Bunch Middle School, Tri-Cities High School, studied at Georgia Tech and Atlanta Area Tech. So one could say I've been here and watched this community grow before my eyes. I've been here, I've never left. And I've been serving this community, and I still serve this community every day. And one of the things that make me excited to run for this community, because I've seen this community grow before my eyes from trees and sticks and nothing. And I noticed that some of the issues that we've been having for a long time, we've been having them over 30 years, and they still have not been fixed. So what I want to do, I recognize that our government has not been running efficiently, and we need the leadership in place that can make this government run efficiently. So tomorrow, when we are not in office, or when I'm a senior, I want to make sure those laws are being passed down, and we can reap the benefits of those laws and legislation, and we can have the resources that we need when I become a senior. And I also want to make sure the seniors now can live their life without having to worry about the government running inefficient. So I'm Mel Keaton. I'm asking for your vote. Those of you who know me know that I'm not afraid of, I'm not a stranger to hard work. I always roll up my sleeves and perform the task. And I have about 95%. I'm about 95% of coming through with the things that I say I'm going to come through with. So I want to let you know, if I'm elected, I won't let you down. You have a candidate that will work on your behalf.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Keaton. Thank you all for letting us know who you are. Now let's get back to the task at hand.
So I'm going to ask the next question. We do have a question from our audience, our live in-person audience. And this question is for Mr. Dawson. As a state representative for District 65 in South Fulton, will you be under your which will be under your representation if elected? We have seen changes to our charter. Will you support only the city-sponsored charter changes decided by the voters at the polls?
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I was a part of the cityhood movement. I always joke and say I wasn't, Dr. King of the cityhood movement, but I was definitely one of those foot soldiers doing the little things that needed to be done to move that forward. And everyone, if you know me, I love South Fulton. I think we're South Fulton strong. And even back then, when we were setting up the city, I have a policy, hands off the charter. Yeah, I think we became a city so that we could have home rule. We have that home rule. I'm proud to live here, proud to call the city of South Fulton home. So I don't want anyone mingling or messing around with the charter except for those who represent the citizens of South Fulton. And once I'm elected, you can rest assured that I'm going to be a strong advocate and fighter for our city, for our charter, for our government, and for our own home rule.
Thank you so very much for your response there, Mr. Dawson. This next question will be for Dr. Pickett. Dr. Pickett, should the United States and the state of Georgia protect Georgians from gun violence by banning assault weapons and large capacity magazines, closing background check loopholes, and passing other common sense gun safety reforms?
Thank you for the question. First and foremost, I do not believe in taking someone's gun rights, but I do believe wholeheartedly that we have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to, number one, keep military grade assault weapons out of the hands of people, particularly those around our schools. We need to work hard to enforce and enact policy that has stringent background checks to make sure we do have those background checks, but also we need to also make sure that people do not have history of violence. So those are kind of things we need to continuously doing by ensuring that, no, not taking away someone's gun rights, but we need to make sure we do all precautions necessary to ensure we're doing everything we can to keep us safe, especially those who inflict or decide they want to do harm. So I do not believe, by no stretch of imagination, military grade guns need to be in the hands of individuals who cannot operate. They don't need to be in the hands of anyone who is a civilian. But we also need to make sure we're doing comprehensive background checks and also ensuring that we're doing things to make sure that they have no history of violence in their background.
Thank you so very much.
So thank you for that response. And to our listening audience, our time clock is set at 2 minutes, which is incorrect. We said we give a minute and a half for each response. And to be fair to the other candidates, I'm going to give you each a question you can answer in 2 minutes. And then we'll get back on track. So my timekeeper, I need this set at 1.5 minutes after the next 2 questions. Okay, so and here is the next question. So I'm going to go back up to Mr. Keaton. What is your position on maternal mortality in Georgia, and how will you work to support your response? You have 2 minutes to answer this question.
Well, I'm assuming you're talking about women's rights to have abortion rights. So that, you know, that shouldn't have never happened. And I want to put more legislation in place that will protect women, because, you know, some people are upfront, some women are upfront, and they explain to our government that they don't want to have children, and people that don't want to have children don't need to have children, and you don't need to force them to have kids, because that can be detrimental to a child's life and a livelihood, and it can also hurt a mother, and you can put a child in a detrimental position. So I will put legislation into place on the Georgia side to make sure that no law enforcement agency or no county judge or in Georgia would not prosecute women that are having abortions. You know, we don't offer enough for the people that have kids and have had children that they may not want. I will put legislation in place to make sure that they have what they need, because we're not offering women enough benefits to have children. You know, daycare is expensive. It's too expensive. People can't afford to have kids, and people still have to go to work and survive. And we don't want our children out here not having food to eat, the parents not being able to go to work to provide for the children, and risk leaving their children at home because they want to go to work and they have to provide for other children. So we need to make sure that our women have the right to their own bodies. You know, I'm for people having rights to their own bodies. So I'm against those abortion laws that they put in place. So
Thank you so very much, Mr. Keaton, for your response, your candid response. This next question will be for Mr. Wakefield. Mr. Wakefield, how will you, as a junior member of the House of Representatives with no connections, relationships, or influence, and who is a member of the minority party, realize your campaign promises in the face of the Republican opposition and obstruction?
Wow, that sounds pretty dire. No connections, no alliances. I mean, listen, I've been telling folks as I've talked to voters, and just as I've talked to anyone about our campaign, the fact that I believe in a politics of change rather than a politics of division. And so the reality is, while the Democratic Party is in the minority, there are a number of legislators that have been successfully been able to work across the aisle, and that's what I intend to do. Right? I believe that most of our best answers and solutions are in the middle ground, and I do feel like there are a lot of compromises to be had. With that said, I think a big part of our job, especially as progressive legislators in the next session or two, is going to be punting and blocking and ensuring that for the most dangerous pieces of legislation, that those never see the light of the day, right? So, you know, right now in the General Assembly, the state Senate has most of the most extreme pieces of legislation that we've seen come out of there over the last couple of cycles. You know, on the House side, it's a little bit more congenial, but my hope is, you know, to find folks that I can work across the aisle with and find common sense solutions. You know, right now, there's still middle ground to be had around, you know, increasing access to more, you know, public health facilities to be built, because rural conservative legislators care about that as much as we do. I think there's middle ground to be found in education. So again, I think that's an area that I would work across the aisle with. And then likewise, I would work across the aisle to, you know, make sure we punt and block for all of the more dangerous pieces of legislation that's going to hurt our communities in the meantime.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Wakefield, for your candid answer. It started over.
Okay.
The clock started over. And just for clarity, when we say connections, we mean in the House. There you go.
Absolutely. So the next question is for Dr. Pickett. Should the state of Georgia expand voter access by allowing same-day voter registration, removing obstacles to voting by mail, and making secure ballot drop boxes accessible at all times throughout Election Day?
That's a most definitely yes. Unfortunately, as we all are Democrats, the Republicans have done everything they can to do what we call voter suppression. They have tried everything they can to suppress the vote of Black people. Just have to say it the way it is. And so we need to make sure that we are providing every opportunity, not just what we just said there, but we also to make sure that we're providing the opportunity for you to be able to vote. If you live in that particular county, you should be able to vote at a precinct in that county. It should not necessarily be just specifically regulated to your respected precinct. And that's another way. They created a law to give water to people while they're in the line. That was foolishness, all because of the fact they actually changed the law for absentee ballots. So now it's for just seniors, military, and college students. So now what you're doing is you're, again, impeding on the rights of people to vote. So we have to make sure we're doing our part to ensure that we're not allowing those who want to suppress the vote that we fought for, and the votes that we're fighting for on a regular basis to do that. But that takes us having to be in that Capitol and standing on that. So yes, we need to make sure that in everything that we're doing, we're providing every citizen the right to vote at any cost and try to alleviate any barriers that will stop that.
And in record time. Thank you so much, Dr. Pickett, for your response. This next question is for Mr. Dawson. Mr. Dawson, should the state of Georgia improve access to safe, affordable housing by increasing the affordable housing supply, protecting tenants' rights to habitable living conditions, and cracking down on negligence or abuse by property management companies and/or landlords?
Thanks for this question. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I'm actually a state licensed home builder. So I build homes and I do commercial roofing. It's a family business. I've been doing it in my entire life. And I wrote an article back during the pandemic that you can find on Google. It's called The American Nightmare, a forecast for housing for Black America after the COVID-19 crisis. In that article, I lay out a policy speaking and answering your question. And absolutely, we have to build millions of affordable units in Georgia. We have to partner with private organizations, faith-based organizations like this, and we do need to tighten up and regulate the laws for tenant rights. And there's a new home ownership program that's been announced in Georgia. That's a step in the right direction. That's moving towards affordable housing for citizens, and a lot of other measures that we can do. But as a state licensed home builder, a developer myself, we're doing it right now. We're building a church fellowship hall in the city of South Fulton, down in District 7. And we have other housing units and construction projects coming up. So we're putting our money where our mouths are, and we're putting shovels in the ground.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So next, we're going to move on to the next question, and this question is for Mel Keaton. Mr. Keaton, should the state of Georgia stop using taxpayer dollars intended for public education to pay for private school vouchers?
Yes, I agree. They should not be doing that. Because if you can afford private school, you can afford to put your, pay for your kids to go to school without using the voucher of taxpayers' money. Because what's going to happen if we let that happen, what's going to happen is they're going to start taking money from the public education and making those classrooms too big and too large for the people that can afford those they can't afford to go to private school. So, and we right now, when I'm looking at it, we have a lot of schools right now all over Atlanta, Fulton County that are closed right now. They just closed it down. And I think that's hurting our community all over the state of Georgia when you're closing down schools and you're making the other classrooms larger than what they have to be. And now we have children that cannot learn, and we have teachers that don't know how to teach the right way. So I feel like they need to keep that money in house for public education so that we can do some training and hire more teachers and make the classroom smaller so our children can have a better access to education.
Again, in record timing. Thank you, Mr. Keaton, for your candid response. Now, our next question will be for, I believe it's Dr. Pickett. I think we're back to you, sir. Dr. Pickett, the question is, should the state of Georgia incentivize clean energy production as part of a climate policy that recognizes the urgent threat that climate change is possessing to Georgians' health, life, and future?
The easy and the simple answer to that is yes. Because of the fact that we are continuously seeing the effects of global warming that is happening across this nation, we need to make sure we're continuously providing spaces and opportunities for those who are taking the additional initiative to provide a safe, cleaner space. That could potentially begin to help towards our fight towards our healthcare system. Of course, we're right now still fighting for a adequate healthcare system. And so we're sitting here without an adequate healthcare system. So we need to find different opportunities, different spaces for us to do that, whether that's solar panels, whether that is, again, gardening, whether that is one of our, the person to whom we are looking to replace. She was very adamant about making sure that agriculture was an entity that was important to this community. And so we need to find ways, again, to make sure that that is something that is pushed forward. So yes, finding that space and giving those breaks for those individuals who are looking to make the world cleaner is by no stretch of imagination a no-brainer in my eyes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that response. The next question is for Mr. Dawson. Should the portion of the Georgia State Constitution allowing for involuntary servitude of prisoners and others convicted of offenses be repealed, thus prohibiting all forms of slavery and involuntary servitude statewide?
I'm an absolute yes on that, and I'll raise it one more point is that we need reparations now. The injustices that we've historically suffered and the continued systematic discrimination that a large part of the citizens of our state suffer calls for some repair. So definitely need to repeal those Jim Crow, slavery time, KKK throwback laws for the modern era and show some social justice to all Georgians. Absolutely.
I think the candidates are becoming pros at beating the time, apparently, ladies and gentlemen. The next question is for Mr. Samuel Wakefield. Mr. Wakefield, as a representative for the 65th District, South Fulton will be under your representation. We have seen, the city of South Fulton has seen changes to our charter. Will you support only allowing city-sponsored charter changes to be decided by voters at the polls?
All right, let's see if I can keep that streak alive. Well, first of all, I believe similar to what was responded earlier, I certainly believe in local rule, and I certainly do think that for all of the citizens of city of South Fulton who fought so hard for us to have our own city, and as a proud resident of the city of South Fulton myself, I do believe that any changes that we make should be made based on our local citizenry. So our own voters, our own local elected leaders making that decision based on our wishes as voters in the city of South Fulton. So I would support any kind of local rule making charter changes.
The vote was depending on who could beat the timer. Apparently, they are all on target. Thank you so very much. Mr. Dawson, what is your position on maternal mortality? What is your position on maternal mortality in Georgia, and how will you work to support your response?
Black women in Georgia are 3 times more likely to
Use your microphone,
Oh,
Mr.
sorry.
Dawson.
Yep. Black women in Georgia are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than other demographics. So apparently that's an issue. It all comes down to expanding Medicaid, and it's not just maternal rights. You know, this week it was disturbing. There's a report that 70% of all HIV cases that are being diagnosed in Georgia are African Americans. 50% of all HIV cases in the nation, they're being diagnosed upon Black women. So it's a serious crisis, not just maternal health, all health care. And if you look at the common denominator, Atlanta's the 3rd ranking city with the most cases of HIV. There's only 2 other cities, Miami and Memphis, with more prevalent cases of HIV. And what do they all 3 have in common? You have Republicans on the opposition party fighting, as Kemp has done this week, to say that he's not for the expansion of Medicaid.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the next question, and this is for Mr. Keaton. Should the United States and the state of Georgia protect Georgians from gun violence by banning assault weapons and large capacity magazines, closing background check loopholes, and passing other common sense gun safety reforms?
Yes, we need to do a better job at doing background checks. And I think that we have some laws on the books that need to be changed. We have some laws on the books that need to be changed as far as, you know, as when I was a kid, this law still is on the books. It has not changed. And when I was 18, you could buy an assault rifle. You could buy an AR-15, AK-47. You can buy all of that stuff because it's considered a rifle. So we just didn't have these kind of problems. However, I am not here to say to control what people's preference is or what kind of weapon they want to have, as long as they're operating it in a safe capacity. Criminals don't give away their guns. If they take guns off the streets, criminals are not going to give their guns up. You'll be taking guns from the law-abiding citizens. So it's a happy medium in as to how this legislation, if some, needs to be passed on gun rights. So I'm a believer that everybody has the right to bear arms because it's our amendment, just as we have a right to vote. We have a right, healthcare is a right. So picking and choosing what law I want to take away from people is the same thing as taking away women's rights to have birth, or telling somebody, hey, you can't, I don't think you should have a Ferrari because it goes 200 miles per hour. I mean, that's your preference. Just be responsible in what you're doing. So we need background checks though.
Thank you again so very much, Mr. Keaton, for your response. This next question is for Mr. Wakefield. Mr. Wakefield, should the state of Georgia improve access to safe, affordable housing by increasing the affordable housing supply, protecting tenants' rights to habitable living conditions, and cracking down on negligence or abuse by property management companies and/or landlords?
Yes, a key part of social determinant of health is housing, right? So in order to ensure that our community is well, folks need good housing, they need good healthcare, they need strong educational systems, they need opportunities to work, right? Those are all important contributing factors to well-being society. And affordable housing is a real issue for us right now, not just because we have a low housing stock, but because we have tax disincentives and we have policies that are not incentivizing at the local level or at the state level creation of more housing stock. And then on top of that, you know, we do have a challenge with ensuring that those who are landlords who can provide more affordable housing have the incentives to do so as well. And so I think we have a number of opportunities, again, to work across the aisle with folks to figure out how do we support people who need housing, and how do we create an additional a larger stock of affordable housing for folks, because those are the things that contribute to well-being for families and societies.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And then we have one more question for, and this is for Dr. Pickett. Dr. Pickett, should the state of Georgia stop using taxpayer dollars intended for public education to pay for private school vouchers?
The answer is that yes. One of my opponents stated that the schools are going to start losing those funds. The local schools, they actually will already lose those funds because that's where they're taking the money from. They're taking the money from the lowest 25% of where our students are. So unfortunately, if your child is classified in the lowest 25% of the or the area where they classify low performing, and they use these phrases as economically disenfranchised. And when they state those kind of phrases, they mean Black folk. And so unfortunately, yes, they're taking funds from our kids, but what they also should be doing is finding a way to ensure that when our families are leaving these communities, the studies were showing, particularly in Fulton County, when I was working in Fulton County, that kids will be losing in the elementary school and in the middle school by 2,000 students a year. Why? Because of the fact that the housing market in those respective areas, families cannot afford to live in those spaces anymore. So now people are moving to spaces like Clayton County, Henry County, because it's cheaper to live out their spaces. So we're going to keep losing those. So we have to find ways to, one, find money to continue to put back in the schools. But then when a student is leaving one school to leave for another, we need to make sure that we're finding a way that that money still follows that student in that respected school, in that public school, because of the fact that the schools that are actually working on funds from last year and not when that student comes into their extra school.
Thank you so kindly, Dr. Pickett, for that response. Now, gentlemen, this last question will be for all of you all, and we will start with Mr. Keaton, and we will work our way back to your left. And so this next question is very simple, very straightforward. What is your stance on voter rights?
Well, my stance on voter rights is
Excuse me, Mr. Keaton, I apologize. You have a minute and a half to answer that question. Yes, please.
My stance on voter rights is we work for that, we deserve that, we earned that. I come from a family that has fought civil rights all their life. My family has come from St. Augustine, where they were fighting for rights, so just to have voting rights, just to be treated as a citizen. So I come from that. So I don't feel like anybody should take that from us. And I feel like we have to fight harder to keep that. And we also got to realize how important voting is. And people don't recognize the power in voting. but voting is power in voting. You can change how much your taxes are. You can change how much your school taxes are. You can change how many food stamps you get, what that looks like. You can change a lot by voting. You could, if you don't vote, then you won't be able to change anything because somebody else will be making the decision for you. So I feel like we got to start putting the power back in the people and let them know the power that they have in voting. And also we got to fight harder to make sure people can vote. Everybody can vote because everybody votes matter. So we have to make sure that we're fighting against the people that are trying to put legislation in place to keep us from voting. And we have to recognize and we have to read. And when we see those things come up, we have to counter it to make sure that doesn't happen and it doesn't keep happening.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Keaton. Again, the same question. What is your stance on the Voter Rights Act, Mr. Dawson?
Hey, of course, I'm a strong proponent of voting rights. I mentioned before that I'm a post-seat holder, been active in the Democratic Party since I was 16 years old, Fulton County Democrats, which is epicenter of this whole issue nationwide. Also working here in South Fulton. Just Saturday, we were out on a canvas, not just for my campaign, but for voter registration, that voter registration deadline that came. We were out canvassing with my colleagues with the South Fulton Democrats over in Cascade, waving signs and signing people up. And then every year, whether I'm on the ballot or not, I'm spending thousands of dollars, literally thousands of dollars out of my own pocket for voter awareness or pushing candidates that I believe in. So I've put my money where my mouth is. I'm in the community, something that I work on. We recently elected our delegates who are going to go to DC to make sure that that the vote is protected and that we have a successful campaign with President Biden and Vice President Harris. I took a Saturday off for my campaign and went and lobbied, and we got our delegate for South Fulton elected. So not just talking about it, being about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson and Mr. Wakefield.
This past weekend, I was out knocking on doors, talking to voters, like many of my other fellow candidates. And I had a conversation with a lady. She was from Guyana. Her family, they were immigrants, and she was now a U.S. citizen. But she told me about her frustration with politics right now in our country. And she told me about her frustration, in particular, with our party. And she talked about the fact that I don't know if I'm going to vote in this election, to be honest, because of our stance on Gaza and a number of things that she ran down. And I listened, and I heard what she was saying. And then, I asked her, so you went through all of this trouble to become a U.S. citizen so that you can exercise a right to vote, so that you could be heard, so that you could be a part of the political process. Are you going to allow these other issues to stand in your way of actually exercising that vote? And, after a second or so, she was like, actually, no, I'm not. And, that conversation is just one microcosm of all of the reasons why I'm a huge proponent of voting and voting rights in particular, because at the end of the day, Winston Churchill says democracy is the worst form of government except for all the other ones. This is the one we have. And this is the way we engage in our political process. And for every person, whether it's a young person or it's my 85-year-old grandmother who's been voting in every election that she could since she was a young adult, every person knows that this is their way to change the things that they don't want to see happening in their community or to create the future that they want to see happen in their community. So, yeah.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Wakefield. And last but not least, Dr. Picken, your stance on voter rights.
Thank you for that. I took some time away from the district. I had some people campaigning, but I took some time away from the district because I had a prior engagement to have some conversation with some young men. And in that conversation, I wanted to discuss with them and talk to them about their stance on the voting process, about how they feel about elections, how they feel about voting. And many of the conversations I had with them were a little disheartening because of the fact they've seen what suppression for their votes have looked like. They've seen what it looks like to not see nationally, their votes, the popular vote happened, but yet somehow or another, someone else goes in position. And so my concern and my fear is what type of world or what type of system are we setting up for the next generations? And so we have to continue to make sure that we're providing space for access for everyone. Again, getting rid of those restrictive access, making sure that we're allowing more access to early voting, more access to absentee ballot. Again, making sure as long as you live in that county line, you should be able to cast your vote in that precinct. We have to make sure that we're setting up. We're young and pretty nice looking, but we eventually will become our elders. And what situation are we setting up for the young people who are the high school students coming in, the college students who are coming in? What world are we setting up for them? And so we need to make sure that we go down there and fight for laws that will set us up for years to come. And that's my stance on our voting rights.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your response, and thank you for that compliment that I am young and good looking. I appreciate it so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard from four candidates, four qualified candidates, if you will, vying to serve as your next state representative for District 65. The elected state representative will serve an unexpired term that begins on January 25th or January, 2025 and ends on December 2025.
And now I'm going to allow the candidates to give their closing statements. So each of the candidates will have 2 minutes to give their closing statements. And in that statement, you want to share your platform, your website, how our listening audience can contact you or volunteer, make donations, or what have you. And so I'm going to start with Mr. Wakefield. You have 2 minutes to give your closing statement, please.
A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to moderate a panel of young they're high school kids, so they're young, high school students. And the panel was about them putting forward their political ideas for what they would want to accomplish if they were running for president. So I watched them get up, make these speeches about, here's what I want to accomplish. And they had all kinds of platforms: education, healthcare, voting rights, the environment, climate change. And what struck me the most, listening to these young folks talk, was hearing their passion for their ideas, but also at the end of the conversation, looking at their idealism and hearing them talk about the idea that reasonable people can come to reasonable solutions. Like, they actually really believed that regardless of the differences in their opinions, that they could still figure it out together. I feel like that's lost in our politics today. And one of the reasons why I'm running is because I believe in a politics of change rather than a politics of division. There are a lot of things that divide us right now as a state, as a country, as a society, as a people. However, I firmly believe that most of our answers are in the middle. I firmly believe that most of the things that we need to get solved have to get solved by seeing eye to eye with each other. And so I'm running as a candidate, as a father, as a husband, as a dad of 4 daughters, who every single day I learn more and more about compromise. I'm running as the candidate who wants to help us to figure out, how do we find the common ground and how do we create change from that common ground? You can find more information about our platform, what we're trying to accomplish, what we're about, and the movement that we're trying to start at samwakefield.com. But I appreciate your time and your vote.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So next, I'm going to move into the next closing statement for Mr. Keaton, Mel Keaton. If you will, tell our listening audience how they can reach you. They want to volunteer, they want to donate, and learn a little bit more about your platform. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Mel Keaton, running for District 65 State Representative, and I would like your vote. And those who know me know I have been doing the work. You can look around and see some of the work I've actually done. When you ride down Highway 92, you can see the light that I got installed because it was a safety concern. Without the help of the city or the state, I got it done when they told me no. My mission is to turn those "we can't do it" to "yes, we can do it" and get these things done. I'm a doer, not a sayer. A lot of my legislation is based around fixing our problems with the HOAs. Well, HOA is a big problem in Georgia right now. We need legislation, and I have the perfect legislation to fix all those issues with HOAs. I also want to let you know that if I'm elected, you're going to get, I'm taking some of this stuff personal. So the people and investment companies that have stolen homes through title fraud, from our seniors and people that have paid their homes off. I'm going to go after those people, and I'm going to make sure those people that have suffered in that case will see reparations and compensation for what has happened to them, because our government should have stood in the way of people losing their home, something they worked all their life for. So, and another thing that I want to fix is our state roads, and make our state roads safer, because I've seen too many fatalities. And I promised some people that if I got in this seat, that I was going to fix some of this stuff. I promised those families, and you can find me, look at my website and see all the great things that I've done at votemelkeaton.com, votemelkeaton.com. Ask the people who know me well. Let them vouch for me, let them speak for me on my behalf, and they can reference that, and they can tell you all the great things I've done for the city of South Fulton, Atlanta, East Point, even Noonan. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So next, I'm going to ask of Dr. Pickett, if you will, tell our listening audience how they can reach you, how they can volunteer, donate, and just learn a little bit more about your platform. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Again, we just want to say thank you to Pastor Chris, Pastor Flint, Ms. Adams, and all those who are here in the church, as well as those who are watching, for this opportunity to speak from our hearts. I believe that you have 4 young Black men who want what's best for our community. And so it's so apropos that we're here at this church this evening, because we really are at a decision point. The decision point to who should be the next person to lead us into our next. We talked about relationships in the conversation and the question tonight. I have those relationships. Not only have I been endorsed by many of the legislators who are there, but I've worked with them. But it goes beyond that. It's great that we have relationships inside of the legislature, but we also need to have relationships with the community. I currently serve right now as the chair of our code enforcement board for our city. And what part of that is having those conversations, going on right along to see what are some of the things that are happening in our city to perfect our city, to make our cities better. And so the work I've done at the state legislature, the work that I've done in our city, the work that I've done as an educator, and the work that I do currently right now in mental health is the work that I want to continue to do as the state representative who represents this great district. We have an opportunity, as has been said, to make a change. So if you want to go to www.picketforchange.com to learn more about what I have to offer for our district. Early voting is a week from today. A week from today. So if you would give me the honor and pick Pickett on the ballot, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much and allowing us to be here this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And next we'll hear from Mr. Dawson. And Mr. Dawson, if you will, go ahead and tell our listening audience how they can reach you, learn a little bit more about your platform, volunteer, make donations, and so on. So you have 2 minutes.
Thanks again. I've enjoyed it here tonight. And I'm Robert Dawson, again, electdawson.com, your candidate for this important position. I think the position is so important, it should not be left in the hands of anyone else. And my message is a positive message. I'll throw out my stump speech, though, because this is serious business, right? The job, the things that we're tasked to handle, what's going on in the world right now is serious. I outlined the issue with the HIV crisis, maternal health. There's one of the biggest scams ever to go down in the history of government just happened with these school vouchers, where they're taking money from the poor, our students here at Sandtown, Stonewall Tail, Westlake, and they're giving welfare to wealthy CEOs and individuals who can then take that public money to the tune of $50,000 if you have 2 children, enough money to buy a Cadillac. We don't have a level 1 trauma center south of I-20. Shakari was in an accident right off of Butner, and we called the ambulance. They didn't come. It was a serious accident. Had some of my canvassers in the car with her. We ended up in Buckhead at Piedmont just to get emergency medical care. They're turning back the time on voting rights. They're turning back the time on maternal health, women's rights. We have a gun crisis. I got my start as chairman of the youth of the Mothers Against Violence. And even now, Just recently, I was out on Fulton Industrial, had to come between two young men ready to kill each other with guns. So we need an adult in the room. We need someone who's serious, someone with compassion. That's me. I'm asking for your support right now. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you so very much for your closing remarks. We thank you so very much for joining us. Again, as stated earlier, you have just heard from 4 qualified candidates vying to serve as the next state representative for District 65. Their future lies in your hands, brothers and sisters. As a constituent, as a voter of Georgia House of Representatives for District 65, it is our hope that you will use your vote as your voice to elect fair representation. And if I may just add, I always say this: good people are elected, bad people are elected each year by good people who don't vote. The following are important dates we want to share with you concerning voting. April 29th through May 17th, early voting begins. May 21st is the primary election. June 18th is the primary runoff election. October 15th through November 1st, early voting in person begins. October 25th, last day to request an absentee ballot. October 19th through October 19th and 26th are Saturday voting. October 20th and 27th are Sunday voting. November 5th is Election Day, and December 3rd is the general election runoff day if necessary. But specifically for this election, early voting starts April 29th through May 17th. Primary is May 21st. Thank you.
And as a resident of Georgia, the Georgia House of Representatives, District 65, you owe it to yourselves, your family, your neighbors, to help elect the next qualified public servant that will develop and govern this great state of Georgia and the House of Representatives in District 65. So in closing, we leave you with this: be an educated and informed voter. Know before you go. Know who is on your ballot. Know what is on your ballot. Know when to vote, and know where to vote. But please exercise your right to vote. And now we're going to turn the forum back over to our host of the evening, Ms. Damita Chatman. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Flint and Ms. Kathy Adams. I want to thank the homeowners that came out, residents of, to hear from the next representative of District 65. What I will tell you guys is I'm staying out of all races. I sent each candidate an email. I would not comment. I would not talk to any candidates, only through email. I'm going to keep the process fair. I want to thank Pastor Chris for allowing us to come tonight. Tomorrow, we will have Representative of District 69 do an interview panel. They each have 30 minutes with the moderator. I sent also an email, and I'm going to ask each candidate to do, please, what I ask each candidate to do. This house is not like the mega churches, so the lights, the water, and the cleanup to come in here every night have to be done. I don't get no money, so whatever y'all don't do, I'm gonna pick up because I believe in doing what's right. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming. I got to say thank you for my husband. I know he ain't gonna want me to say that, but he gonna make sure that I'm on point. I'm gonna be fair. And when I get out of line, he gonna say, Damita, you shouldn't have said that. So I want to thank my support and my backbone for being here for me. And I'm going to say openly that I love him. And you know, it's just, I was sitting there just to see all of these men here. That says something. We often hear that the woman, but I also believe in the men. I didn't want to preach, but the Bible say the man is the head. He didn't say nothing about the woman. He say the man is the head. So I believe in that. So I want to thank each one of you candidates for coming. Wish you luck. On May 21st, we're going to see who's going to cross over the finish line. I want to thank the camera crew, been here all day. And so I'm going to go get some of this Jamaican food that they try this Jamaican food out. But I want to thank them also. And again, good night. We see you guys tomorrow night. Thank you.